volcano in southwest Iceland has erupted, releasing streams of lava from under the Earth's surface. It follows thousands of small earthquakes in the area over recent weeks. The fissure erupted 30 kilometers from the capital, Reykjavik, and is more than 500 meters long. This is the first eruption in the area in centuries.
This is what Icelanders have been waiting for weeks now. 40 kilometers south of the capital, Reykjavik, lava began spewing from the ground on Friday evening, and a no-fly zone has been established in the area. In 2010, the eruption of another volcano ejected a column of ash 9 kilometers into the air that brought flights to a halt across Europe. The small village of Grindavik is just a few kilometers away. For weeks now, they have been affected by near constant earthquakes and tremors, warning of the upcoming eruption. Police have told residents to close their windows and stay indoors due to the risk of gas pollution carried by the wind. And after 900 years of volcanic inactivity, people in the area have been flooding social media with photos and videos of this formidable sight.
Flames and panic in the largest refugee camp in the world. More than 1 million Rohingya refugees from Myanmar live in Cox's Bazar. Their shelters are flimsy and closely packed. The fire started on Monday afternoon and spread fast.
Oh brother, I don't have any idea where my wife and children are. Oh Allah, where are my wife and children? I'm alone now. I was unable to salvage anything from my home.
Thousands of shelters were reportedly destroyed in the blaze. At least 20,000 people fled for their lives. As black smoke billowed overhead, people scrambled to save their belongings and gather their families.
I can't find my children or even my husband. The name of one child is Mamun and another is Rubia, and my husband's name is Anumanji.
It's not known what started the blaze. One witness told the news agency Agence France Presse that the fire spread faster after gas cylinders used for cooking exploded.
Maybe more than 1,000 shelters have burned down. Many people have died. Elderly people were unable to get out of the shelters.
Firefighters worked into the night.
The lush Caribbean island of St. Vincent transformed into a grey, gloomy moonscape. Streets and buildings blanketed by ash spewed from a nearby volcano. La Soufrière ended decades of inactivity on Friday when it erupted in spectacular fashion. There were several earthquakes and a column of ash was pumped up to 15 kilometres into the air. And it's hampering the escape of thousands of people who are now in shelters across the island. La Soufrière means sulphur outlet. It's the only potentially active volcano on St. Vincent, which is home to about 100,000 people. Ash from the eruptions rained down on several neighbouring islands, including Barbados, nearly 200 kilometres away. Countries including Venezuela, Cuba, Guyana and the United States are sending aid to the island nation. Cruise ships have been sent in to help those fleeing the eruption, but because of the pandemic, anyone going on board will have to be vaccinated, and everyone in a shelter will be tested for COVID-19. There have been 5 explosive eruptions on St. Vincent in the past 300 years, but damage to crops and farms from the choking cloud of ash is expected to be severe.
We are agricultural-based community. I feel this is going to be life will be very difficult.
And experts say the eruption could continue for some time yet. Alexia O'Brien, Al Jazeera.
Anger on the streets of the Colombian capital. This is just one of protests nationwide that have lasted for 4 days now against government fiscal reform that opponents say that amid the pandemic is just too much to bear. At times, the protests have turned deadly, with isolated looting, vandalism and accusations of police violence from human rights organizations as both sides clashed in several cities. In the face of pressure not just from the public but the opposition and politicians in his own party, President Ivan Duque announced on Friday that the reform would be revised.
Another terrifying night in Colombia's third largest city, Cali. Videos shot by residents of two working-class neighborhoods apparently show the police shooting indiscriminately against protesters. The morning after, the scenes of destruction were unmistakable. The mayor said at least 5 people were killed and 33 injured. The western city of Cali has become the epicenter of the ongoing protests against the social and economic policies of President Iván Duque. On Tuesday, the United Nations and the European Union condemned the excessive use of force on part of Colombia's security forces.
Tuesday in Ceuta, and still they kept coming. Some had swum around the border fences sticking out into the Mediterranean Sea or used rubber dinghies. Others simply walked across at low tide. One young man's known to have drowned. Dozens have been treated for hypothermia. The adults were transferred to Ceuta's main football stadium, but those thought to be minors were sent to warehouses run by the Red Cross and other groups. The Spanish government's now sending 400 extra troops and police to boost Ceuta's border force while appealing for calm. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has cancelled a trip to Paris for a summit on international aid to Africa. Instead, he's travelling to Ceuta, which is separated from Morocco by a 10-metre-high fence. Meanwhile, Madrid's dismissed suggestions the sudden rise in migrant arrivals is linked to a diplomatic row. Last month, Morocco reacted angrily when it emerged that Brahim Ghali, the head of the Polisario Front, had been allowed into Spain for COVID-19 treatment. The Algeria-backed group has fought for decades for Western Sahara's independence from Morocco. Analysts had warned the row over Ghali could push the Moroccan government to limit cooperation over illegal migration and other issues. Brussels is now urging it to stop any more people trying to reach Spanish territory.
The most important thing now is that Morocco continues to commit to prevent irregular departures, and that those that do not have the right to stay are orderly and effectively returned.
Spain says it is expelling all those who've entered Ceuta illegally, but it's not clear if that applies to unaccompanied migrants under 18, who are usually allowed to remain. Nadeem Barber, Al Jazeera.
The small enclave off the northern coast of Morocco is the EU's only land border with Africa, making it a magnet for migrants seeking to enter Europe from beaches a few kilometres to the south. A journey that's worth the risk for these migrants.
French police officers patrol a beach at night near Calais on a mission to prevent migrants and refugees from trying to cross the English Channel to reach the UK by boat. People smugglers charge migrants thousands of dollars for a place on a boat. They often use old bunkers like this one to hide material. There were nearly 10,000 attempted crossings last year. At least 6 people died. Police have bolstered security along the coast, and Britain's helping to fund patrols that now take place around the clock, with some officers on motorbikes. Many of the migrants are from Eritrea, Sudan, Iraq or Afghanistan. Stuck in squalid conditions in Calais, some say that the police harass them. We saw officers clear hundreds of people from a camp. This group of young Afghans say that they'll risk a boat crossing for a decent life. Brexit and the pandemic haven't dissuaded some from trying to reach Britain, or ended dreams of the sort of safety that many take for granted.
The damage here stretches for miles. Wind and rain from Tropical Storm Claudette ripping through the south, the system spawning tornadoes.
You can feel the trailer lift up and fly, and then started clipping.
Destiny Ward was inside and somehow survived.
All that's boosted in my trailer.
In other areas, it was the water building way too fast, flooding communities from Louisiana through Alabama. First responders say a car likely hydroplaned on I-65 just south of Montgomery, setting off a chain reaction crash.
I've never seen anything like it. It was horrific.
At least 10 people died in the pileup, including 8 children, ages 4 to 17, traveling in a small bus operated by the Alabama Sheriff's Youth Ranch. The group was just 2 hours from home after spending a week at the beach. A string of tornadoes and driving rains also left parts of the Midwest in ruins. The Chicago suburbs of Woodridge and Naperville dealing with some of the worst of it.
In the middle, running down the stairs, I just could feel the whole house shake.
Teams now working through the damage.
With unrelenting rain since the start of October, Shaanxi is said to be experiencing the worst autumn flooding in history, resulting in the destruction of dams, rail lines and highways. There have been multiple landslides, and the Fenhe River, a tributary of the Yellow River, has recorded its most powerful flood peak in 57 years. Emergency teams, helped by heavy equipment, have been racing to shore up defences to prevent more flooding. But already thousands of hectares of farmland have been inundated, 19,000 homes destroyed, and 120,000 people evacuated. Considered the birthplace of Chinese civilization, Shaanxi is rich in culturally important sites and relics, with many now said to be at risk. Shaanxi is also an important coal-producing province, and there have been fears these storms could worsen China's shortage of coal, which has resulted in power outages across the country. These floods come less than 3 months after rains and flooding in neighboring Henan province killed more than 300 people. Again, rainfall records were broken across the province, with the provincial capital experiencing 200 millimeters of rain in a single hour. Back in Shaanxi province, millions of dollars and much-needed relief supplies have been provided for people affected by these floods.
In Yemen's 7 years of a war, the guns have rarely fallen silent. Now, a fierce battle for control is being waged in the northeast. Houthi rebels are fighting to capture Marib. The oil-rich province is the Yemeni government's last stronghold in the north. After weeks of siege and fighting, the Houthis say they're encircling and capturing more areas, including a strategic gateway to Marib city and parts of neighboring Shabwa province. Saudi-backed Yemeni government forces and their allied tribal fighters are pushing back, with dozens of airstrikes and a ground offensive in Marib. Marib already hosts hundreds of thousands of displaced people from across Yemen. The UN says thousands more have been displaced by the fighting in the province in the last month. A siege by Houthis is stopping humanitarian aid and critical medical supplies from reaching those who need them. The UN is urging both sides to allow safe passage for civilians and aid workers. But so far, those calls have been ignored. Priyanka Gupta, Al Jazeera. New frontier in Ethiopia's war. Rebels in Tigray say they are advancing further south towards the capital Addis Ababa. The federal government has declared a nationwide state of emergency. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has asked all Ethiopians to mobilize and fight back against the rebels. In just a few days, the rebels from the northern Tigray state say they have seized the towns of Desce and Kombolcha, which are in the neighboring Amhara state. The two are on a major highway leading to the capital. The United States has warned the Tigray People's Liberation Front or the TPLF against any such move. There are concerns that violence could escalate, with Tigrayan rebels joining forces with the Oromo Liberation Army, an armed group in the region surrounding the capital Addis. And it's families like these who are paying the highest price for the shifting battle lines of Ethiopia's war that's dragged on for nearly a year. More than 2.5 million people have been forced to leave their homes, and around 400,000 are on the brink of famine.
To Europe, where COVID cases are surging, increasing more than 50% in just the last month, which is why several countries are now reimposing restrictions, and angry protests are erupting as a result. Police in Brussels using water cannons to disperse marchers. Demonstrators there are angry at tightened COVID measures and possible vaccine mandates. Across Europe, frustration is running high. ABC's Julia McFarlane is in London for us tonight.
Tonight, violent protests erupting across Europe against strict COVID-19 restrictions. The continent again the epicenter of the pandemic. In the Dutch city of Rotterdam, angry crowds seen torching police cars, burning bicycles and setting off flares.
Police firing warning shots, injuring protesters, deploying water cannons, trying to quell the unrest that has been brewing for days,
after the Netherlands have reimposed lockdown to try and curb spiralling cases, and now plans to introduce a vaccine passport for indoor venues. Officials say dozens of people have been arrested, several officers injured by furious crowds throwing rocks. In Belgium, police clashing with demonstrators, days after the government introduced new COVID restrictions in response to a jump in infections. It now has one of the highest rates of infections in Europe. And the Austrian government rolling out a total lockdown starting tomorrow. Austria also becoming the first country in Europe to make the vaccine mandatory to all citizens, not just health workers. From February, people who still refuse the vaccine may find themselves fined. Vaccination rates in parts of Europe have slowed in recent months. Many countries with low take-up, like Germany, Austria and Slovakia, seeing a rise in cases.
Well, the situation in Europe is likely to get worse as winter approaches. People will be mixing indoors more, especially in the run-up to Christmas as families travel to reunite. The World Health Organization warning that unless urgent action is taken, Europe may see 500,000 more deaths by March. Lindsay?
Just astonishing numbers, Julia. Thank you.
Assessing the damage from above after Mount Sinai spewed piles of ash 12,000 meters into the sky. Down below, entire homes have been submerged. Villages blanketed with falling ash. The creeping lava is destroying everything in its path. Semeru is one of Indonesia's nearly 130 active volcanoes. And is the highest peak on the nation's most densely populated island of Java. The sudden eruption was triggered by days of heavy rain. Smoldering debris, thick smoke, and power outages have hampered search and rescue operations. Evacuation efforts have been suspended for now, with the clouds surrounding the affected area remaining too hot to handle. People who managed to escape have been staying at this evacuation center. Those who want to return home have been told they can't, and to stay far away from the crater's mouth. The volcano had seen an increase in activity in recent days, but its alert status was not raised. Now, many here want to know why they weren't warned. An answer many will be seeking as they pick up the pieces of what is left behind.
Tonight, days after tornadoes sliced through multiple states, there are still more than 100 people unaccounted for in Kentucky alone.
We have people missing. I still expect that we will find at least some more bodies.
In Bowling Green, 11 people from 2 families died on one street.
Everything else you can replace, but family you cannot.
Here in Mayfield, this debris, of course, will be here for some time. All of this used to be a steakhouse, but today utility crews scrambled to install row after row of power poles, trying to get back at least some sense of normalcy.
for our dogs, and we were both praying.
All of a sudden the walls caved in on me, the ceiling caved in and blew me up on the floor. I was trapped in the corner under the dining room table as everything was just crashing around me. And I was trying to get to my wife at the other end of the house. Here I was covered with blood.
My friend Roberta was buried under 5 feet of rubble, and her sister was on top of her.
My flashlight to the edge of the house, and I noticed there was no wall there, and I was going to tell my wife, I said, I want to tell you right now, I'm warning you, you're going to walk on it. And I got up and looked around in disbelief, and the walls were gone on the other side of the house, and this side you can see is what it is now. We got nothing.
In Syria's major port city of Latakia, the sound of airstrikes thunder in the distance as fireballs light up the night sky. This is the result of Israeli missiles, according to Syrian state media. The Syrian government also reports that residential buildings, a hospital, shops, and containers were all damaged in the attack. The port of Latakia is in the west of the country and handles most of Syria's imports. This is the second reported Israeli airstrike there this month. The earlier attack happened on December 7th and also targeted the container facility. It was reported to be the first on the facility since the start of the war in Syria in 2011. His missile strikes on Latakia were larger than the previous ones. Israel's military has not commented on either of the airstrikes, but it has previously confirmed conducting raids against Iranian targets inside Syria. Mohammed Jamjoom, Al Jazeera.
The UK, the US, Canada, Germany, France, Italy, Japan. The G7 is a club of advanced economy democracies and their friends. And these meetings are a chance for them to affirm both what they're for and what they're against. Of all their perceived threats, COVID, China, Iran and more, it's that of Russia that is seen as the hottest issue. With Russian troops massed on the other side of the Ukrainian border, there's clear alarm from Western democracies about the possibility of an invasion.
Liz Truss's rallying cry for what she calls the free world is that like-minded countries should step up, they should unify, they should stop their introspection and drift, and push back against perceived aggressors Russia and China. And they should do this using economics and technology.